It was just a stupid dare born from too much expensive tequila. She was supposed to plant a single kiss on the terrifying stranger in the corner booth and walk away. But when his rough hand clamped around her waist, she realized she hadn't just kissed a man. She'd claimed a monster. The ambient lighting inside the Violet Hour, one of Chicago's most exclusive speakeasies, was designed to conceal secrets. It cast long, velvet shadows against the exposed brick and made the crystal glasses of Macallan 18-year single malt sparkle like crushed diamonds. Clarissa Robinson sat at a curved leather booth, nursing a glass of sparkling water with a lime twist, feeling profoundly out of place. Clarissa was a size 18 in a room full of size 2s. She wore a custom dark sapphire wrap dress she had ordered from 11 Honoré, a garment specifically tailored to hug her thick thighs, cinch her waist, and flatter her generous curves. She knew she looked beautiful. Her auburn hair fell in thick, loose waves over her shoulders, and her makeup was flawless. Yet, surrounded by the gold-plated, razor-thin elite of the Gold Coast neighborhood, the old, familiar insecurities clawed at her confidence. Across the table, her supposed best friend, Samantha, was 3 glasses deep into a bottle of vintage Casamigos. Samantha was a former pageant queen with sharp collarbones, a trust fund, and a terrible habit of disguising insults as friendly banter. "Come on, Clarissa, live a little," Samantha slurred, slamming her shot glass down onto the mahogany table. "It's your 26th birthday. You've been sitting there all night, calculating the tip in your head, like we're at a networking event for Grant Thornton. You need to do something reckless." "I am living," Clarissa replied smoothly, though her jaw tightened. "I just don't find doing tequila shots until I vomit in an uber-black, particularly glamorous." Samantha rolled her eyes, leaning across the table, her gaze sweeping the dimly lit room. "You never take risks, Chloe. You hide. You use your job as a shield, and honestly, you use your body as a shield, too. You think because you're bigger, men aren't looking. But they are. You just never give them the time of day." The word stung, hitting a bruised nerve. Clarissa gripped her glass. It wasn't that she didn't want attention, it was that she was exhausted by the fetishization, or the subtle, patronizing surprise men showed when they realized a plus-size woman could be fiercely intelligent and devastatingly gorgeous. She didn't hide, she just refused to settle. "I don't hide," Clarissa snapped, her voice dropping to a dangerous register. "I just have standards." Samantha's eyes gleamed with a toxic mix of alcohol and mischief. "Prove it." She pointed a manicured finger toward the far, elevated corner of the lounge. "Truth or dare?" "I dare you to go over there and kiss him." Clarissa followed Samantha's trembling finger, and her breath hitched. The man sitting in the VIP alcove wasn't just a patron. He looked like he owned the building, the block, and possibly the city. He was dressed in a charcoal Tom Ford suit that stretched taut over broad, heavy shoulders. He looked to be in his mid-30s, with dark, neatly parted hair, a strong, angular jaw covered in a faint shadow of stubble, and eyes so dark they looked like endless voids. He was the most serious, intimidating man Clarissa had ever seen. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't speaking to the 2 massive, heavily tattooed men standing like gargoyles on either side of his table. He was simply watching the room with a cold, predatory stillness. "Absolutely not," Clarissa whispered, her heart kicking against her ribs. "Look at him, Sam. He looks like he breaks legs for a living. His security detail alone will tackle me before I get within 5 feet. "Coward," Samantha sing-songed loudly, drawing the attention of the table next to them. The safe, funny, fat friend. Always playing it safe. That did it. The ugly label triggered a flash of blinding, uncharacteristic rage inside Clarissa. Safe. Funny. Fat. She shoved her glass away, the ice clinking sharply against the crystal. She stood up, smoothing the sapphire fabric over her plush hips. "Hold my purse," Clarissa commanded. Before her rational brain could hit the emergency brakes, Clarissa was crossing the Persian rugs of the lounge. Every step felt like walking through wet cement. Her dark heels clicked rhythmically. As she approached the elevated alcove, the two gargoyles in suits shifted, their hands instinctively dropping toward the inside of their jackets. "Ma'am, this is a private—" one of them began, his voice like gravel. The man in the Tom Ford suit raised a single heavy hand, his thick silver ring catching the dim light. The guards instantly stepped back, silencing themselves. Clarissa stood before the table. Up close, he was even more terrifying. His cologne, a heady mix of cedarwood, rich tobacco and expensive leather, wrapped around her. He didn't say a word. He just looked up at her, his dark eyes slowly trailing from the soft swell of her cleavage down to the curve of her hips, and back up to her flushed face. There was no patronizing surprise in his gaze, only a heavy, scorching heat. "I'm sorry," Clarissa blurted out, her voice trembling slightly. "I lost a bet." Before he could respond, before she could lose her nerve, Clarissa leaned down. She meant to just brush her lips against his cheek, a fleeting peck to satisfy Samantha's cruel game. But as she leaned in, he shifted. His large, calloused hand shot out, wrapping securely around the thick curve of her waist. He didn't grab her roughly, but the grip was immovable, an iron band possessing her. He pulled her forward, off balance, so she tumbled right onto his lap. The solid wall of his chest met her soft, generous curves. Clarissa gasped, but the sound was swallowed by his mouth. He didn't accept the peck. He took the kiss. His lips were firm, tasting of rich scotch and danger. He kissed her with a slow, devastating authority, his other hand sliding up to grip the nape of her neck, tangling in her auburn hair. Clarissa's entire body went up in flames. She had never been touched like this, with such reverence, such absolute, terrifying ownership. For a second, she kissed him back, her hands instinctively resting on his broad shoulders, feeling the heavy muscle beneath the expensive wool of his suit. When he finally pulled back, the entire lounge seemed dead silent. Clarissa was panting, her chest heaving, her lipstick smeared. She looked into his dark eyes, expecting to see a joke, a smirk, a dismissal. Instead, he brushed his thumb across her swollen bottom lip. "You taste like lime," he murmured, his voice a deep, gravelly baritone that sent shivers down her spine. "What's your name, Tesoro?" Panic finally pierced through the haze of lust. What had she just done? "I have to go," Clarissa stammered. She scrambled off his lap, her legs shaking so violently she almost tripped. "Wait," he commanded. But Clarissa didn't look back. She practically ran out of the violet hour, ignoring Samantha's shocked shouting. She burst out onto the cold, windy pavement of Darman Avenue, hailing a yellow cab with frantic waves. She fell into the back seat, her heart hammering against her ribs, her waist still burning where his large hand had gripped her. She had survived the dare, but the heavy, possessive look in that stranger's eyes told her the game was far from over. The morning light filtering into Clarissa's Lincoln Park apartment was agonizingly bright. She sat at her kitchen island, downing 3 Advil with a lukewarm cup of black coffee, aggressively typing on her laptop. The lingering phantom sensation of a large hand on her waist had kept her tossing and turning all night. She had managed to push the disastrous kiss out of her mind by focusing on reality. She was a senior financial auditor at Grant Thornton. She had a mortgage, a strict timeline for making partner, and no room for reckless speakeasy behavior. Today was critical. Her firm was taking on a massive new client, a sprawling international logistics corporation, and she had been tapped by her managing partner to lead the initial risk assessment. By 9 a.m., Clarissa was marching through the glass-paneled lobby of the Willis Tower, looking impeccably professional in a tailored, wide-leg charcoal suit and a crisp white silk blouse. Her curves were draped elegantly, commanding respect. She felt in control, She was no longer the flustered girl from the bar. She was an apex predator in the corporate world. She entered the massive oak-paneled boardroom on the 54th floor. Her boss, David, a nervous, balding man in his 50s, was already pacing. "Clarissa, thank God," David said, wiping sweat from his brow. "The CEO is coming down personally for this introduction. They are moving billions through their shipping lanes. We cannot afford to lose this account." "Breathe, David," Clarissa said calmly, setting her heavy leather portfolio on the mahogany table. "It's just numbers. I've read their preliminary filings. It's a standard holding company with heavy infrastructure assets. We'll map their cash flow, flag the variances, and be out of here in 3 weeks." The heavy double doors of the boardroom clicked open. The room's temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. 4 men walked in. The first 3 were broad-shouldered and sharp-eyed, moving less like corporate executives and more like a tactical unit. But it was the man who walked in the center that made the breath completely vanish from Clarissa's lungs. It was him. The stranger from the bar. He was wearing a bespoke navy suit today, a heavy gold Rolex gleaming on his thick wrist. His dark eyes scanned the room with a terrifying, predatory calm until they locked onto Clarissa. The moment his gaze found her, he stopped. A slow, chillingly possessive smirk curved the corner of his mouth. "Mr. Romano," David stammered, rushing forward to offer a trembling hand. "Thank you for trusting Grant Thornton. I am David Miller, a senior partner, and this is my lead auditor, Clarissa Robinson." Romano. The name echoed in Clarissa's mind. Dominic Romano. He was the enigmatic, reclusive billionaire who had taken over Romano Holdings 5 years ago. He rarely gave interviews. He was a ghost in the financial pages. Dominic ignored David's hand completely. He didn't break eye contact with Clarissa as he slowly walked around the massive conference table, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. "Miss Robinson," Dominic said, his gravelly voice wrapping around her name like velvet. "What a remarkable coincidence. We just missed each other last night." David blinked, looking frantically between them. "You two know each other?" "We're briefly acquainted," Dominic said softly, stopping just inches from where Clarissa stood, frozen. He leaned in, lowering his voice so only she could hear the raspy timbre of it. "Though she left before I could properly return the favor she gave me." Clarissa's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs, but her survival instincts kicked in. She squared her shoulders, refusing to cower. "I apologize for my abrupt departure, Mr. Romano. I had an early morning preparing for this audit. Shall we begin looking at your quarterly ledgers?" Dominic's eyes flared with a dark, terrifying amusement. He liked her defiance. He liked that she wasn't shrinking. "Of course. But I have one condition for Grant Thornton." He turned his head slightly toward David, though his eyes remained fixed on Clarissa's flushed face. "Miss Robinson works directly with me, from my private office on the penthouse floor. No intermediaries." David eagerly nodded. "Yes, absolutely. Whatever you need, Mr. Romano." For the next 3 days, Clarissa's life became a high-stakes, psychological war. She was moved to the 72nd floor, a sprawling, private fortress of glass and steel. Dominic was a constant, looming presence. He didn't touch her, but he didn't have to. His eyes followed her every move. When she ordered a sad salad for lunch, he had it thrown away, replacing it with a massive spread of handmade tortellini and imported burrata from a private chef, explicitly demanding she eat something that actually nourishes her. When she complained that the AC in his office was too cold, a courier arrived an hour later with a luxurious, heavy cashmere wrap. It wasn't just any wrap. It was a custom piece from a boutique on Oak Street, draped perfectly to accommodate her broad shoulders and full bust. He was paying attention to her body. He was anticipating her needs. It was intoxicating, and it terrified her. But Clarissa was excellent at her job. Too excellent. On Thursday evening, long after the rest of the building had emptied out, Clarissa remained at the massive glass desk in Dominic's outer office. The rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. She was digging through a series of shell companies listed under Romano Logistics. The numbers weren't adding up. Millions of dollars were being routed through a concrete subsidiary in Cicero, Illinois, and disappearing into offshore accounts before coming back as clean real estate investments. It was textbook money laundering, but on a scale that made her blood run cold. Frowning, Clarissa printed the ledger. She needed to cross-reference it with the physical files Dominic kept in his inner sanctum. The heavy mahogany door to his private office was slightly ajar. She stepped quietly toward the door, intending to just grab the Cicero file from his credenza. But as she pushed the door open, she froze. Dominic was standing by his window, his back to her, speaking on a burner phone. The smooth corporate facade was gone. His voice was a harsh, guttural snarl. "I don't care what the alderman promised," Dominic barked into the phone. "You tell him he has exactly 24 hours to authorize the port expansion, or I will ruin him. I have the photographs from the Palmer House Hotel. I have the offshore wire transfers. You tell him if he crosses the Romano family again, I won't just end his career. I will erase his entire bloodline from this city's social registry. Do you understand me? He will be less than a ghost." Clarissa stopped breathing. The Romano family, the port expansion, the Cicero concrete companies. The pieces snapped together with horrifying clarity. This wasn't a logistics empire. This was the Chicago outfit. And she had just kissed and was currently auditing the most ruthless Mafia boss in the Midwest. Her hand trembled, and the printed ledger slipped from her fingers. The thick paper hit the hardwood floor with a soft, distinct slap. Dominic stopped speaking. The silence in the massive office was sudden, heavy, and suffocating. Slowly, he ended the call, slipping the phone into his pocket. He turned around. His dark, soulless eyes locked onto Clarissa, standing in the doorway, staring at the damning ledger on the floor. "Well," Dominic said softly, the predatory stillness returning to his massive frame as he began to walk toward her. "It seems my beautiful auditor is working overtime." Clarissa couldn't move. The silence in the penthouse office was so absolute she could hear the relentless thud of her own pulse pounding in her ears. Dominic Romano moved with a slow, deliberate grace that belied his massive frame, stepping away from the floor-to-ceiling windows. The stormy Chicago skyline cast him in sharp, imposing silhouettes. He didn't look angry. That was what terrified her the most. There was no rage in his dark eyes, only a cold, calculating possession. He stopped inches from her, his expensive cologne, that familiar, intoxicating blend of cedar and rich tobacco enveloping her senses. Slowly he crouched down, the fabric of his bespoke suit pulling taut over his muscular thighs. He picked up the printed ledger from the hardwood floor. His large, calloused fingers smoothed the paper. "Cicero," Dominic murmured, his voice a low rumble. He stood back up, towering over her. "You are incredibly thorough, Miss Robinson. Most auditors at your level would have glossed right over the shell company discrepancies to meet the Friday deadline. But not you." "Let me leave," Clarissa managed to say, her voice shaking despite her desperate attempt to keep it steady. "I'll resign from Grant Thornton tomorrow. I'll wipe my hard drive." "I saw nothing. I know nothing." Dominic let out a low, dark chuckle that vibrated deep in his chest. He reached out, his knuckles lightly grazing the soft curve of her cheek. Clarissa gasped, her skin burning at the contact, but she didn't pull away. She couldn't. "You and I both know you're a terrible liar, Tesoro," he whispered softly. "And we both know you can't leave. Not now. You can't keep me here," Clarissa shot back, a spark of her natural defiance breaking through the terror. She squared her shoulders, standing at her full height, her lush curves cutting a striking figure in the tailored charcoal suit. I am a senior auditor at a major firm. I have friends. I have family. If I disappear, people will look for me." "Oh, sweet Clarissa," Dominic said, his gaze darkening with pity and amusement. "Who do you think sent you to me?" Clarissa blinked, her brow furrowing. "What?" "Your managing partner, David Miller," Dominic explained, stepping closer until his chest almost brushed hers. "David has a terrible gambling addiction. He owes my associates over $2 million from his weekend excursions to the Horseshoe Casino in Hammond. When I told him I needed Grant Thornton to rubber stamp my financials for a new, legitimate port acquisition, David offered you up." The words hit Clarissa like a physical blow. The air rushed out of her lungs. "David knows exactly who I am," Dominic continued ruthlessly. "He knew my books were dirty. He put you on this account because he thought you were just a desk jockey who would blindly sign off on the ledgers to secure your path to partner. And if you dug too deep, he assumed I would quietly eliminate the problem. He threw you to the wolves, Clarissa, to save his own skin. Betrayal, sharp and acidic, burned in her throat. Her entire career, her late nights, her sacrifices, it was all a pawn in a desperate man's game with the Chicago outfit." "Why are you telling me this?" Clarissa whispered, her eyes shining with unshed tears of pure, unadulterated fury. "Because I don't want to eliminate you," Dominic said. His hand slid from her cheek down to her waist, his heavy palm resting firmly against the generous curve of her hip. The touch was branding, possessive. "When you walked up to me at the violet hour, looking like an absolute goddess wrapped in sapphire, you showed no fear. You demanded my attention. Men spend their entire lives trembling in my presence, and you sat on my lap and stole my breath." He leaned in closer, his lips brushing the shell of her ear. "You think you need to hide your size, Clarissa. You think it makes you a target for ridicule. But to me, you are a masterpiece. A queen meant to be worshipped, not hidden away in a cubicle. And right now, I need my queen's brilliant mind." Clarissa shivered, a chaotic mix of fear and an undeniable, forbidden thrill racing through her veins. "Need me for what?" "The FBI is building a RICO case," Dominic stated, his tone shifting back to hard business. "Special Agent Thomas Cavanaugh has been circling my operations for 2 years. He knows about the Cicero concrete plants, but he doesn't have the paper trail. Yet. I need you to scrub the books. I need you to use your genius to bury the money so deep in legitimate philanthropic trusts and offshore real estate that Cavanaugh goes blind looking for it. You fix my empire, Clarissa, and I will give you the world." "And if I refuse?" she asked, though the fight was already draining out of her, replaced by a dark, intoxicating ambition. Dominic's thumb stroked the soft fabric of her blazer over her hip. "Then Cavanaugh raids this building by Tuesday. I go to federal prison, and David Miller makes sure you take the fall as the lead auditor who authorized the fraudulent accounts. We are chained together now, Tesoro." Clarissa looked into the dark, bottomless eyes of the most dangerous man in Chicago. The corporate world had never protected her. Samantha had mocked her. David had sold her to the Mafia. For the first time in her life, the monster in the shadows was the only one offering her genuine power. Clarissa reached up, her manicured fingers resting against the lapel of his suit. "I want David Miller fired and stripped of his pension," she demanded, her voice crystal clear. "And I want complete autonomy over the trust structuring. You don't question my methods?" A wicked, triumphant smile broke across Dominic's face. He wrapped his arm entirely around her thick waist, pulling her flush against his solid body. "Deal." 3 weeks later, the grand foyer of the Adler Planetarium was dripping with wealth and whispered secrets. The annual gala for the Chicago Historical Foundation was the event of the season, a glittering sea of diamonds, tuxedos, and champagne. Clarissa stood near the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the dark, sprawling expanse of Lake Michigan. She was no longer the cautious auditor, hiding behind tailored charcoal suits. Tonight, she wore a custom, breathtaking emerald silk gown by Christian Siriano. The dress featured a daring sweetheart neckline that showcased her full bust, cinching tightly at her waist before cascading over her thick, lush hips, leaving a dramatic train in her wake. She looked like royalty. She felt like a god. Across the room, Dominic was holding court with 2 state senators and a prominent judge. Every few seconds, his dark eyes would flick through the crowd, tracking her, guarding her. The heavy, possessive weight of his gaze was a constant comfort. The last 3 weeks had been a blur of adrenaline, encrypted servers, and late nights in the penthouse. Clarissa had completely dismantled the Romano family's dirty financial structure. Using her intricate knowledge of international tax loopholes, she had funneled the Cicero concrete funds through a labyrinth of clean, legitimate charity trusts set up in the Cayman Islands, effectively washing the money so thoroughly it shined. She had outsmarted the federal government. Miss Robinson, or should I say, the new chief financial officer of Romano Holdings? Clarissa turned slowly, her champagne flute held elegantly in one hand. Standing before her was a tall, sharply dressed man, with silvering hair and eyes like chipped ice. He flashed a badge from the inside pocket of his tuxedo jacket. Special Agent Thomas Cavanaugh, FBI, he introduced himself, a smug, patronizing smile on his lips. You look stunning tonight. Emerald is definitely your color. A massive upgrade from your modest salary at Grant Thornton, wouldn't you say? Clarissa didn't flinch. She took a slow sip of her champagne. Good evening, Agent Cavanaugh. I'm afraid I don't discuss corporate compensation at charity events. Cavanaugh stepped closer, dropping his voice to a menacing hiss. You think you're clever, don't you? A little number cruncher who decided to play mobster. We know about the kiss at the Violet Hour, Clarissa. We know Dominic used you to scrub the Cicero books. You might have hidden the paper trail for now, but I will tear your life apart. I will subpoena your family. I will freeze your bank accounts. Turn state's evidence right now, and I can protect you from him. Clarissa laughed. It wasn't a nervous flutter. It was a dark, melodic sound that genuinely startled the veteran FBI agent. Protect me? Clarissa tilted her head, looking at Cavanaugh with absolute pity. Agent Cavanaugh, you have nothing. I've restructured Romano Holdings into a fortress. Every dollar is accounted for in audited, sovereign wealth-backed philanthropic trusts. If you subpoena me, my legal team, which happens to be the most expensive firm in the state, will sue the Federal Bureau of Investigation for targeted harassment and defamation. You will lose your pension, your badge, and your reputation before the case even reaches a judge's desk. Cavanaugh's face turned a mottled shade of red. His smugness evaporated, replaced by a desperate, impotent rage. You arrogant! Is there a problem here, Agent? The temperature in the room plummeted. Dominic stepped up behind Clarissa, his massive presence instantly dwarfing the federal agent. He didn't raise his voice, but the lethal promise in his tone made several nearby guests subtly step away. Dominic's large hand came to rest firmly on the curve of Clarissa's waist, his fingers pressing possessively into the emerald silk. Cavanaugh glared at Dominic, his jaw ticking. Enjoy the party, Romano. The feds never sleep. Neither do we, Dominic replied coldly. Now get away from my woman before I have my security throw you into the lake. Cavanaugh sneered, but wisely backed away, disappearing into the glittering crowd. Dominic turned Clarissa gently in his arms, his dark eyes sweeping over her flawless face, ignoring the hundreds of elite guests around them. Did he upset you, Tesoro? Not at all, Clarissa smiled, her hands coming up to rest on the broad, solid expanse of his chest. I just reminded him that he's playing checkers, and we own the board. Dominic let out a harsh, beautiful breath, leaning his forehead against hers. "You are magnificent," he whispered fiercely. "You saved my empire. You saved me." "I just did my job, Mr. Romano," she teased softly. "No," Dominic corrected, his gaze burning with a terrifying, absolute devotion. "You took your throne, right there, under the vaulted ceilings of the planetarium and the watchful eyes of Chicago's elite. Dominic Romano leaned down and kissed her. It was a kiss that mirrored the very first one at the speakeasy, commanding, consuming, and wildly possessive. But this time, Clarissa wasn't running away. She wrapped her arms around the neck of the Mafia boss, kissing him back with all the fierce, unapologetic power she had finally embraced. She had been dared to kiss a monster, but in the end, she had become his queen. Did this thrilling tale of dark secrets, dangerous dares, and Mafia romance leave you completely breathless? Don't let the story end here. If you want to dive into more gripping, high-stakes dramas and steamy real-life sagas, hit that like button right now. Share this video with your friends who love a fierce, unstoppable heroine, and make sure to subscribe to our channel for more unbelievable stories.